On the day I came of age, the snow fell heavily, and he declared his intention to break off our engagement. Gazing upon the slender, yet vengeful figure before me, I realized he, like me, had been reborn. In our previous life, the object of his affection ascended to the palace as a favored consort, leaving him with no choice but to wed me. Throughout our 3 years of marriage, he bestowed upon me nothing but indifference and resentment. After the tragic death of his beloved during childbirth, he descended into madness, igniting the Xie residence in a bid to take me down with him. Now, in this new life, he is undoubtedly intent on seeking to be with the one he truly loves. Before the artificial mountain, he hastily annulled our engagement, gazing at my cousin and proclaiming, "It is as if heaven has opened its eyes to fulfill my unwavering devotion." Behind the artificial mountain, a man clad in a bright yellow dragon robe leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Who says it is not?" 1. The snow in December cascaded down in a flurry, while Xie appeared utterly oblivious, kneeling on the ground with his back held straight. My mind is made up. Today I shall certainly annul this engagement. With the assistance of a maid, I stepped out of the courtyard, the soft and chilly snow beneath my feet serving as a reminder of the stark reality. I had indeed been reborn, returning to the very day of my coming-of-age ceremony. My father had organized a grand feast, attended by the esteemed nobles of the capital. At that moment, they all turned their gazes toward a single direction. Halting abruptly to kneel, none other than the heir of the Duke of Wei, Xie, who sought to break off our engagement. Having never witnessed such a sight, it was a disgrace for the Cui family and a dishonor for the Xie family to reject the marriage on the day of a girl's coming of age. My father, infuriated, smashed his wine cup, while the Duke of Wei, his face darkened, reprimanded, "Have you lost your senses before entering the banquet?" Yet Xie maintained but a single declaration, "I wish to annul the engagement with the Cui family. I shall never marry Cui Wan." Gazing upon his youthful visage, which betrayed a familiar steely resolve, I felt a jolt in my heart. It turned out he, too, had experienced the cycle of rebirth. 2. In my past life, Xie had also attended my coming-of-age ceremony, yet he did not break off our engagement. He was renowned in the capital as a paragon of virtue, with strict upbringing and a profound sense of propriety. Even upon learning that his beloved was to enter the palace for selection, he merely drowned his sorrows in drink at my coming-of-age banquet. However, his drunkenness irrevocably shattered our childhood betrothal. For the following day, it became common knowledge that the heir of the Duke of Wei, in a state of intoxication, had trespassed into the chambers of the Cui family's daughter, remaining with her until dawn. Naturally, my family's fury was palpable. A young woman had been offended in her own home, and now bore such a disgrace. Xie, compelled by the Duke of Wei, offered apologies and proposed to hasten the wedding. He complied dutifully, yet after our marriage, he harbored resentment towards me. "I had no idea that Miss Cui possessed such audacity, such shamelessness," he spat. "Do you truly believe that through coercion you can have your way? How laughable. If you doubt it, then watch closely." Despite his transgression, he regarded me with a chilling disdain. His heart belonged to my cousin, who was soon to enter the palace. Realizing he could not salvage that love, he had already resolved to request a posting to the borders after my coming-of-age banquet, never to return. Alas! That one fateful night had obliterated his aspirations of a pure love, which he wished to reserve for his beloved. Thus, he feigned joy, agreeing to the marriage, yet subjected me to 3 years of coldness and cruelty. Even when I fell ill, he concealed the matter from my parents, choosing instead to sit by my bedside, coldly observing, "Cui Wan, is this what you desired?" On the day the news of my cousin Zheng Yue's tragic demise reached me, he first set foot in my courtyard. The maid remarked that I had endured long enough to finally see the light, and her words stirred a flicker of anticipation within my long silent heart, allowing her to cheerfully adorn me. Yet as Xie drew near, reeking of alcohol, and noticed my fluttering eyelashes from anxiety, he suddenly laughed. Upon opening my eyes, I was met with a face full of mockery. "What are you anticipating?" "I was merely pondering what expression you would wear if you were to conceive and subsequently perish in despair during childbirth." 3. My face paled abruptly, and in a fit of anger, I struck him across the face. 3 years of grievances surged within me. Xie, if you are unwilling, why marry me? Your affections may be noble, but what sin have I committed? By what right do you treat me thus? He suddenly seized a candle, his eyes dark and foreboding. On that day of your coming of age, I was inebriated, yet you were not. Even now, you refuse to acknowledge your long-prepared machinations? I was quite disoriented that day, unsure of what I had consumed. I was assisted back and merely rested. It was only upon waking that I found you in my room. I had repeated this explanation countless times over the past 3 years. Yet Xie had grown weary of it and remained unconvinced. He scoffed, then, amidst my screams, ignited the curtains with the candle. I had intended for you to endure the same suffering as Uesis, but I fear she may be waiting too long below. Today, you shall accompany me. When you see her, you must speak well of me, claiming all is your fault, for my heart has always belonged to her. Madman! You lunatic! I wished to return to the Chui family. I turned in panic, only to be yanked back by him. His bloodthirsty eyes now filled with a familiar derision. You've dressed so exquisitely today, truly believing I would consummate our union? And if I did, what of a potential pregnancy? Do you think I truly care for you, or the child that may come from you? She is the moon above. You are but the mud below. How can you compare? Flames spread, and I had descended into despair, unable to utter a sound. Whether it was the acrid smoke or the terror of death, tears streamed down my face. Xie, my parents proclaim I am the most precious treasure in the world, destined for a fulfilling life. Had I not encountered you, I should have been so. He seemed to freeze momentarily, then the beams of the room collapsed, and I lost consciousness. I awoke on the very day of my coming of age. For the snowfall in the courtyard had finally ceased. Xie finds his fate with Miss Chui insufficient. I beseech you to understand this sooner rather than later. Prolonging it serves no purpose. Xie raised his gaze directly to mine. To force it would only forge a pair of resentful partners. Unfilial child. The Duke of Wei strode forward, seizing a sword from a nearby guard, striking Xie on the back with the scabbard. I shall not have you utter such nonsense. Where has your usual decorum gone? Each blow grew heavier. The Duke of Wei, a martial champion, dealt with his inept son with a certain sense of wasted talent. Upon seeing the blood trickling from the corner of Xie mouth, my father intervened. Such a calamity at my coming-of-age banquet was already unfortunate enough. To escalate into a matter of life and death would be far worse. He calmed the Duke of Wei, glaring coldly at Xie. I have watched you grow. You call me Uncle Chui, and I shall set aside my authority. My daughter, Chui Yuanshan, in terms of talent and beauty, is surely worthy of the likes of you. Xie lifted his gaze to me, momentarily stunned. Miss Chui possesses both virtue and beauty, truly the foremost among the young ladies of the capital. If that is the case, my mother hurriedly arrived, tightly grasping my hand. Her typically gentle face now bore a frostiness akin to ice. You shall stand at the gate of the Chui residence and loudly declare 3 times that you, Xie, are unworthy of Chui Wan, and request to annul the engagement. Then it shall be settled. 5. Xie face darkened instantly. He had not anticipated that the usually affectionate Princess Rongan would utter such words. Seeing my astonishment, my mother patted my hand. Wanner, see clearly. A man's vows are but fleeting, yet a refusal to yield, even at the cost of his pride, reveals a heart of iron and stone. Upon hearing this, I understood. My mother sought to punish Xie for his complete lack of consideration for me and his public rejection, while simultaneously attempting to alleviate my sorrow. In my past life, after waking in my chamber, despite harboring a deep-seated hatred for me, Xie maintained his usual demeanor of politeness and decorum. My parents, having watched him grow, knew his character well, and thus he deceived everyone. Now, even if he possessed the slightest reluctance, it would be enough for my parents to call off the engagement. Their only concern was for me. Contemplating this, I firmly grasped my mother's hand. Do not worry, mother. I raised my voice, clearly enunciating. I have never liked Xie. 6. Indeed, I never did like him. It was my cousin who harbored affections for him. My cousin is the eldest daughter of my uncle. In his youth, my uncle, due to a bureaucratic assignment to the southern regions, encountered the sole daughter of the Zheng family from Qinghe, Zheng Yan. He willingly relinquished his official position in the capital to pursue this romantic entanglement, even engaging in a fierce quarrel with my grandfather, who believed that the Zheng family, since the passing of the late emperor, had been covertly plotting by delaying the transfer of military authority under the pretext of the young emperor's immaturity. However, my uncle was single-minded in his desire to unite with the Zheng family, going so far as to arrive at their doorstep in a bridal sedan chair, which became a source of amusement in the capital for several years. Sending my cousin to the capital for her upbringing was my uncle's way of dispelling suspicions regarding the Zheng family. Thus, my cousin grew up alongside me, and I took great care of her, treating her as my own sister. Even if I possessed something unique, I would willingly give it to her if I saw desire in her eyes. In my previous life, before my cousin entered the palace, she would frequently speak of Xie Manor, extolling his grace and remarkable talents. Yet, I later discovered that she often omitted certain details. For instance, Xie Manor had invited her to the Lantern Festival, gifted her a priceless jade hairpin, and concealed her name within a poem at a gathering of poets. She concealed these truths, frequently remarking, "You see, you and the young master are so well matched." She often brought up the topic of marriage, to which I dismissed. Father and mother said it ultimately depends on whom I like. Upon hearing this, my cousin would gently clench her hands at her side and reply, "Uncle and Aunt truly dote on you." Later, at the coming-of-age banquet, the incident occurred, and shortly thereafter, I married Xie Manor. In the second year of our marriage, when I visited the palace to pay my respects to her, the now consort Su, she affectionately patted my hand, saying, "Sister, you have married the gentleman most coveted by the noble women of the capital. You are indeed fortunate. Young Master Xie is so thoughtful, even while away in the southern regions. He specially sent rare delicacies from Nangguang, and the guard said 2 swift horses were exhausted in the process. Would you like to taste them? Ah, how foolish of me. As a newlywed, he must have spoiled you already." During Xie Man's absence in Nangguang, I had not enjoyed any exquisite dishes nor received a word from him. Subsequently, such occurrences continued, with one being a minister in court and the other a consort in the palace, as though they were engaged in some elaborate game of intimacy. For me, it was a living nightmare. Until my last moment, I longed for divine intervention, praying not to be caught in the web of someone else's fate. With tears welling in my eyes, I came to my senses just as Xie Manor knelt outside the Chui residence. Uttering his final words, Xie Manor fully understands he is unworthy of Chui Wan. Today, I voluntarily request to annul our engagement. He raised his head to meet my gaze from afar. In the perplexed look he gave me, I slowly smiled. After 10 years of acquaintance and 3 years as spouses, this was the wisest decision he had ever made. 7. My body began to warm during the night. I felt drowsy, much like in my past life. In preparation for my coming-of-age ceremony, I had hardly eaten anything, save for a platter of pastries my cousin brought me. Having experienced so much in this life, I naturally understood her ill intentions toward me. Yet I found myself reborn, still a step behind. Fortunately, although she wished to ruin me, her possessiveness prevented her from allowing anything truly significant to transpire between Xie Manor and me, and the effects of the drug were not overly potent. Additionally, with matters weighing on my mind, I could not afford to sleep until dawn as I had in my previous life. Venturing alone to the back courtyard to catch a breeze, I overheard a hushed conversation between a man and a woman. It was Xie Manor and my cousin, Zheng Yuezhu. "Young master, I arrived early at the temple today to pray for Awan. What brings you here at this hour? Shouldn't you be Yuezhu? The one I love is you, not Chui Wan." Xie Manor, entirely oblivious to the astonishment on Zheng Yuezhu's face, grasped her hand tightly, fervently expressing the longing that had spanned a lifetime. It is as if heaven has taken pity, fulfilling my fervent desires. Zheng Yuezhu's expression at that moment could only be described as horrifying. Despite having met in private on numerous occasions, they had always maintained a veneer of propriety, with her controlling the situation due to Xie Man's reserved nature. She had never witnessed him speak so candidly. Zheng Yuezhu composed herself and replied, "Young master, you have a betrothal to my cousin. How can you utter such words? Yuezhu, you must not know that I have already annulled my engagement to Chui Wan." He gazed at her unwaveringly. "Thus, I may seek your hand in marriage." Zheng Yuezhu, despite her usual restraint, could no longer maintain her composure. She forcefully pulled her hand away from Xie, exclaiming, "Young master, do not speak nonsense. In a few days, the matron will come to escort me to the palace. I am the emperor's woman. How can you seek to marry me?" Xie face turned ashen. "Yuezhu, did you not say it was a pity that I was already betrothed? Otherwise, you would surely wish to be with me?" Observing the confrontation between the two, I shook my head, muttering, "The emperor really ought to lock them away. Why must he break apart a couple? He deserves what happened in my past life." "What should I deserve?" A cold voice echoed in my ear, startling me. I turned to find Li Xiujin's handsome visage looming larger. My legs weakened, and I nearly fell to my knees. Your Majesty?" The figure before me, clad in a black fox fur cloak that concealed a resplendent yellow dragon robe, had remnants of snow resting between his indifferent brows, softening the gaze he directed toward me. The youth I had not seen since my marriage now appeared as though no time had passed, as if we were separated by realms. Yet, I had always harbored a fear of him, as if it were ingrained in my very being. Hastily, I attempted to bow, nearly losing my balance, only to be steadied by his firm grip. I intended to rise quickly to express my gratitude, but perhaps it was the proximity that triggered the latent effects of the drug, causing my body to weaken, rendering me motionless against him. His deep-set eyes stirred with concern as he scrutinized me, frowning. "Cui Wan, what is wrong?" If my father were to witness me in such a state, clinging to the young emperor he had painstakingly nurtured, he would surely cover his face and exclaim, "What a disgrace!" With the last of my strength, I straightened myself. "Your Majesty, I am fine. See, I am..." Before I could finish, I swayed again, only to be caught once more in his embrace. He nearly crushed me against him. A sigh, laced with apprehension, fell upon my head. "Cui Wan, who is there?" From behind the rockery, Xie voice suddenly rang out. Zheng Yuezhu, regaining her composure, turned pale and feigned calmness. "What if someone discovers us meeting under the moonlight? What will happen to my entry into the palace?" Xie hesitated for a moment at her instinctive reaction, but decided to check behind the rockery for any presence. The sound of approaching footsteps drew nearer, and I paid no heed to this, gripping Li Xiujin's sleeve and glancing toward the narrow path beside the rockery. "Your Majesty, we must hide quickly." Yet, he merely raised an eyebrow and tightened his hold around my waist, unconcerned. Why should I hide? 9. I had considered that given Li Xiujin's aloof and solitary nature, he might abandon me to flee on his own. However, I never anticipated that he would remain completely still, refusing to budge. Aside from my father, I had never seen Li Xiujin heed anyone's words. At this moment, eavesdropping seemed to him a perfectly reasonable endeavor. I could not help but inwardly marvel. Being an emperor surely has its privileges, as no one dared to speak against him. Consequently, when Xie led Zheng Yuezhu to the rockery, what they encountered was a composed Li Xiujin and me, nestled against him, desperately attempting to diminish my presence. Your Majesty?" Both Xie and Zheng Yuezhu were taken aback, hastily kneeling. For some reason, witnessing their flustered state brought me a sense of vindication. Li Xiujin had ascended to the throne at the tender age of 10, presiding over governance and earning the respect of all court officials, while children of his age in the capital still feared the reprimands of their tutors. Many, like the diligent Xie, admired the young emperor's demeanor, viewing him as the ruler they would one day loyally serve. It is said that he composed a poem for the young emperor, pouring forth his deep admiration and loyalty for the sovereign, yet was met with the emperor's curt response: "Speak only what is true, refrain from flattery and ostentation." Xie, in a fit of humiliation and anger, did not attend school for 3 days. Being 2 years his junior, I often witnessed my father returning home with the emperor's collected writings, thick volumes that brought an expression of deep satisfaction to his face. I had always harbored a fear of him, for he possessed an innate authority that commanded respect without the need for anger. And there was a tinge of jealousy, as I felt he had usurped my father's attention. Li Xiujin could well be described as the nightmare of our generation in the capital. Contemplating how everyone feared him, I suddenly found him not so terrifying after all. "Rise."
Li Xiujin comanda.
Before either of them could stand, Their gazes had already settled upon me, nestled in his embrace. Xie Zicheng pressed his lips together, casting a reproachful glance my way. Cui Wan, what are you doing? Zheng Yuezis clenched the fabric of her skirt tightly, glaring at the hand of Li Xiujin that held me. Your Majesty, my cousin has always been spoiled, having just come of age today. She surely did not intend to offend you. Li Xiujin raised his eyelids coolly. Did I say she offended me? Zheng Yuezis' face stiffened. No, not at all. You speak of her being spoiled, yet the Grand Tutor often laments to me that he worries she is too well-behaved. Or are you, as her cousin, more aware than her own father? Upon hearing this, Xie Zicheng turned to Zheng Yuezis, who, losing her composure, hurriedly explained, I misspoke. My sister has a most amiable disposition. I was no longer inclined to listen to their dialogue, feeling unbearably hot as if I were beside a furnace, while Li Xiujin's cool skin was soothing, prompting me to draw closer to him. With this thought, I instinctively wrapped my arms around his neck, like a morning glory entwining a tree trunk. Both Xie Zicheng and Zheng Yuezis were taken aback by my boldness. Cui Wan, do you realize what you are doing? I recognized the voice of Xie Zicheng, sharp and biting, as he often was. I nestled closer into the crook of Li Xiujin's neck, my gaze hazily fixed on his ear, which had taken on a faint blush. I do, I sighed contentedly, candidly admitting, it feels wonderful. Li Xiujin's ear turned an even deeper shade of crimson. Xie Zicheng stared at me, his brows furrowing deeper, yet he was momentarily captivated by the flush on my cheek. Suddenly, as if struck by a realization, his face drained of color. So, you were indeed telling the truth. He said this without context, yet I understood what he meant. I had explained to him countless times that on the night of my coming of age, I was also a victim, but he had never believed me, often mocking me instead. Now, he finally believed that I had never harbored any ill intent towards him. Yet this revelation seemed to be an even harder truth for him to accept. As I gazed at Xie Zicheng lost in thought, a warm hand suddenly covered my eyes. A cool voice rang in my ear. If there is nothing else, you may withdraw. This was directed at the two of them. However, Xie Zicheng abruptly stepped forward. May I inquire where His Majesty intends to take Cui Wan? His tone was clearly one of questioning, despite his status as a subject. Li Xiujin surveyed him coolly. Do I owe you an explanation? Xie Zicheng lowered his gaze. I would not dare, but today is my cousin's coming of age. And your Majesty has just returned from the northern mountains, where rumors are often most vicious. Your concern is noted, but I merely passed by to visit the Grand Tutor. Li Xiujin removed his hand from my eyes, allowing my flushed face to be seen for a fleeting moment before it was quickly obscured again. Perhaps Xie Zicheng could enlighten me on Cui Wan's condition? Xie Zicheng, seeing me in a daze, hastily began to respond. My sister is quite taken with the young master. Having just been jilted, she indulged in a few drinks, and now it appears she is intoxicated. Zheng Yuezis interjected, discreetly tugging at Xie Zicheng's sleeve, signaling him to say no more. Jilted? I have only heard of the young master shouting at the Cui residents about being unworthy of Cui Wan, Li Xiujin remarked, his tone rising as he fixed his gaze on Xie Zicheng. So, the young master is aware of his own limitations. I am pleased for the Duke of the State and shall reward him with the mountain fowl I hunted today. According to my father, when the emperor is pleased, he often rewards his subjects with game, yet he never bestows mountain fowl. How can mountain fowl be a reward? It is not a phoenix. This was not merely a lack of respect, but rather a veiled mockery. Xie Zicheng, bewildered, accepted the reward, his head bowed, clearly displeased. I suspected he was recalling the poem he had painstakingly crafted for the emperor at the tender age of 10. Perhaps he thought that shouting I am a fool would have pleased Li Xiujin far more. Zheng Yuezis stepped forward. Thank you for your consideration, Your Majesty. I merely came out to find my sister and happened upon the young master. Why not entrust Wan to me? I shall take her home. Li Xiujin remained silent. This silence filled me with trepidation. The effects of the medicine had yet to wear off, and the two before me, reminiscent of my past life, seemed intent on tormenting me. If I were to be handed over to Zheng Yuezis, it was likely that the horrors of the past would repeat themselves by dawn. Among the three present, only Li Xiujin was someone I could trust at this moment. Despite his regal demeanor, he instilled in me a sense of safety, and I hoped he would refrain from handing me over, perhaps out of fondness for our shared childhood or in recognition of my parents' loyalty to the throne. I buried myself deeper into his embrace, calling out to him in a muffled voice, reminiscent of my childhood, "Brother Jean." No one knew that before I understood the world. When my cousin had yet to arrive in the capital, my only companion had been Li Xiujin. In those days, the late empress was still alive, and my mother often visited her. While the adults conversed, I would run to the window of Li Xiujin's royal school and wave at him. After he bid farewell to my father, he would secretly come to play with me. Later, when the late emperor passed away, the empress clung to the young Li Xiujin to govern the court, and years later, he withdrew from public life to return power to the people. My mother would hold me and sigh, saying only, "Jeaner will find joy less and less as the days go by." We became estranged. Knowing only through my father's praises of the boy who once delighted in making me laugh, now grown into a composed sovereign. After all these years, in my quest for refuge, I sought closeness with this childhood companion. "Will you stay with me, Brother Jean?" The next day, I was awakened by the frantic voice of my father. He and my mother were speaking behind a screen in my room, their voices growing increasingly loud. A solitary man and a woman alone for an entire night, in Wano's chamber no less. What on earth is he thinking? This sentence rang painfully familiar, as if I had heard it before, jolting me upright from the bed. Blinking in confusion, still caught in the remnants of sleep, I was met with mocking voices, my cousin's exclamations, and Xie Zicheng's cold, resentful gaze. What followed was a chaotic descent into becoming the matriarch of the Xie family, sacrificing my life for the love of my husband. The searing flames consumed my mother's countless efforts to style my hair and the exquisite silk garments my father had arranged for me. In the final moments, I struggled to free myself from Xie Zicheng's iron grip, but time and again, I failed, as he cruelly mocked me amidst the flames. "Do not waste your strength. I will drag you to meet Uezus." My heart brimmed with innocent despair. I cursed him as a madman, cried out that I wanted to go home, longing for my parents. Yet he remained unyieldingly cruel, leaving me with no means of escape. "Uezus envies you for your wonderful parents, but you shall never see them again, nor return to the Chui family. Even in death, you will enter my family's grave as a member of the Xie clan," thus balancing Uezus's grievances. The scenes I endured felt all too real, as if I were still ensnared within them, unable to break free. My parents rushed in from the outer room, shaking me awake, my mother enveloping my trembling body in her arms, soothing me repeatedly. Did my little girl have a nightmare? What fire burns so painfully? "Mother is here. Do not be afraid." I opened my eyes to find only my parents in the room, devoid of my cousin from the previous life and her entourage of curious friends. No longer did I wish to explain myself to my cousin, whose resentful gaze was fixed upon me, ultimately resolved to marry me only to torment me slowly thereafter. Xie Zichen. I inhaled deeply, my heart still fluttering with unease. My father, visibly anxious, inquired, "Speak honestly to your father. Has the emperor bullied you?" I was taken aback, Li Xiujin. My mother, while combing my hair, recounted the events. The nightmare of my previous life did not return. Li Xiujin had ordered the imperial guard to encircle my chamber tightly, while he stood guard over me throughout the night. My parents were aware only that my courtyard had been off-limits the previous day, and that Li Xiujin had emerged from my room early in the morning. I recollected the night of tranquility, during which a pair of eyes had observed me for an extended period. My father pieced together the situation, yet he remained tense, his expression dark. The emperor is meticulous. Not a whisper of this has escaped. My mother seemed to be attempting to soothe him. My father said nothing further, only urged me to rest well before striding out. "Your father and I only wish for your happiness and peace, yet why do you keep such significant matters to yourself? You were not always this way as a child. I do not understand why, as you have grown, the little bit of temperament we painstakingly nurtured has been worn away." My mother fell into reminiscence. Her eyes filled with compassion. I recalled my younger self, doted upon and vivacious, until my cousin's arrival, when I often found her quietly weeping in a corner. I asked her what was troubling her. "When my parents are near, I can be as carefree as you, but I was born with a hard fate. Every time I see you express your desires without hesitation, I feel sorrow." She cried bitterly, leaving me at a loss for words on how to comfort her. Subsequently, whenever she witnessed me asking my parents for something or indulging in play without reprimand, she would also weep. "Sister, how can you be so willful?" she frequently admonished me, seemingly unable to tolerate even a hint of my disobedience. Gradually, I became more restrained, unexpectedly causing my parents to worry about me. My mother held my hand and said, "Your father and I have vowed before heaven and earth to protect you, Xie. Your father has imparted all his knowledge to the young emperor. Both your father and I have been bound by responsibility since childhood, as have many in this world, including the current emperor. None have had the opportunity to escape into freedom, except for you. We all wish for you to live freely and gracefully. Our Wanwan, even if a little willful and headstrong, is perfectly acceptable." I felt a wave of emotion, leaning into my mother's embrace, reluctant to let go. "Mother, is it permissible for me not to marry? Does it relate to your nightmare?" I nodded, and my mother, with a pained expression, gently caressed my face, refraining from asking further. "Of course, it is permissible. Then your father and I shall cherish you for a lifetime." To alleviate my thoughts of the nightmare, my mother brought me to the birthday banquet of the Princess of Pingnan. Upon hearing there was a bamboo grove at the Wang residence, I ventured out to take a stroll. However, I unexpectedly encountered Xie in a narrow passage within the Wang estate. "Cui Wan, what is your relationship with the emperor?" His tone was commanding, reminiscent of the previous life. I felt discomfort and pretended not to hear, attempting to walk past him, only to be seized by the wrist. Compelled to face him. "You have returned, have you not?" Just as I could see through the expression in his eyes, reminiscent of our past life. He too seemed to recognize it. I let out a cold laugh. Our engagement was no more, so there was little to lose. "What? Do you wish to kill me once more?" He pressed his lips together, acknowledging his past deeds, and after a pause, continued, "You were poisoned last night. Why were you with the emperor? Are you perhaps scheming for another chance at life? What was he so enraged about?" No matter. I relished provoking him now. "Indeed, I am scheming for that. You can break off our engagement to pursue my cousin, so why can't I seek the man I desire?" His face flushed white, and then red. "The man you desire? Is it not me?" Before I could respond, he tightened his grip on my hand. "Are you willing to risk your life for a fleeting moment of rivalry over the bamboo?" I could only perceive his cat-like demeanor as rather pitiful. "Xie, listen well. I have never had any affection for you, nor have I ever intended to marry you. After last night, you should understand this. You and your beloved have ruined my life. Now you wish to impede my happiness?" He released my hand, stepping back, shaking his head, still obstinate.
Guivan.
"He is the emperor. Did you not witness the outcome of Yuezhu in your past life? You need only manage your Yuezhu. My affairs are of no concern to you." He attempted to obstruct me once more, but I casually kicked him, and he stumbled into a nearby pond. The water was shallow, yet the mud was thick and uninviting. Xiezichen's elegant attire was now ruined.
Guivan.
"How dare you?" He floundered in the mud, filled with indignation. "What is there to fear? I only wish I could find a room to lock you in and set it ablaze. Or perhaps lock your beloved in as well, to fulfill your long-held wish. How does that sound?" His face, muddied, was momentarily obscured by shock. "We are living this life anew. I thought our past could be forgotten, yet you harbor such hatred towards me?" Hearing my laughter, I gazed at this nobleman in the mud, lamenting how blind the capital's people were to bestow upon him the title of the first young master. Were it not for the fear of mentioning Li Xiujin, would he have had such a title? Who said we could forget the past, Xie? You must open your eyes and live well. It was far from enough. The suffering I endured in my previous life would not be in vain. With that, I strode past him, only to collide with someone at the end of the bamboo grove. Li Xiujin's elongated gaze bore a hint of mischief as he quietly observed me. I could not help but remark, "Your Majesty, have you become addicted to eavesdropping?" Perhaps my mother's earlier exhortation to be a little willful had taken effect. Or perhaps the anger provoked by Xie had yet to subside, but I felt no fear in the presence of Li Xiujin. I looked at him with defiance. "Your Majesty, you have seen it all. Indeed, it was I who pushed him. I am simply a headstrong person." He merely smiled and said, "The Grand Tutor will be pleased." What did that have to do with my father? Just as I was about to inquire, I noticed his gaze drop to my wrist, where Xie had left a red mark. His expression darkened as he reached out, and I instinctively recoiled. His hand halted midair. Last night, you were not so distant. I was poisoned last night. If I offended your majesty, it was unintentional. Li Xiujin withdrew his hand, yet his gaze lingered on the mark at my wrist. What do you intend to do about the poisoner? Upon closer inspection of his expression, it seemed he already knew who it was. Their status is special. There will be no repercussions. My cousin was sheltered in the capital, raised in the Chui residence. And the Zheng family of Qinghe was a prominent clan. My parents were also concerned about this, having covertly dealt with the maidservant who acted as my cousin's informant, feeling deep remorse towards me. Furthermore, my cousin was soon to enter the palace. Considering this, I looked at Li Xiujin and asked, Your Majesty, could you prevent my cousin from entering the palace? If Zheng Yuezhu were to enter, it would inevitably mirror the events of my past life. Feigning concern for her sister while devising numerous ways to bring me discomfort, Li Xiujin paused, suddenly lifting his eyes to regard me leisurely. Why do you wish to prevent her from entering the palace? As I pondered an excuse, he leaned in closer and whispered, Before you broke off your engagement with Xie, I too had considered this. Do you know why? I turned my eyes, analyzing. Although my father and the Duke of Wei are old friends, their political views often clash. The emperor fears that should the Chui and Xie families become in-laws, there would be no more quarrels during court sessions, resulting in a dull atmosphere. A long silence ensued. I widened my eyes at the tension in Li Xiujin's face.
Guivan.
For the first time, someone spoke my name with such gritted teeth. Am I mistaken in my guess? You truly are your father's daughter, he remarked.
Likewise.
Your Majesty, you are undoubtedly a worthy emperor, I replied, barely managing to save face from the flattery that nearly slipped beyond my grasp. I suspected that Li Xiujin was indeed vexed, yet I had no concrete evidence. At the banquet celebrating the former empress's longevity, despite the splendid performances, he maintained a stoic demeanor. My doubts about my misplaced flattery grew as I frequently glanced at him in the main seat, only to find that he seemed to have no desire to meet my gaze. A chill ran through me. It was a dire situation, facing two adversaries, and I had carelessly severed the one substantial connection. I had to play the emotional card. Could it be that my reluctance to allow Zheng Yuezhe into the palace stemmed from his own fondness for her? In my past life, Zheng Yuezhe indeed enjoyed great favor after being conferred the title of Shufei. Otherwise, she would not have boasted before me daily. Yet, it seemed that her displays of pride were more about Xie affections. Still, she did bear a prince in the previous incarnation.
Just as I pondered this,
Zheng Yuezhe emerged in a resplendent gown of flowing silk, rising to perform a dance. Her movements were ethereal, like a dream. The Duke of Heqing had sent a letter to the emperor, stating that if the emperor would permit his cousin to enter the palace and be granted a title, he would relinquish control of the Huainan military. This was known to many present. With other noble families diminishing, the Zheng clan stood unrivaled. The control of Huainan had been a matter of contention since the emperor's ascension, and I wondered how the duke, having been a son-in-law for so many years, had managed to sway the Zheng family. Without the need for a single soldier, simply bestowing a title could reclaim everything, a rare opportunity indeed. Surely, the emperor would, as in my past life, seamlessly welcome his cousin into the palace? How naive I was to think of dissuading him from such a course. I noticed the tension in his expression finally easing. Perhaps this dance was a prompt for the emperor to announce her entry into the palace, sooner rather than later. Once the performance concluded, she gracefully approached the empress to offer her well wishes, yet her gaze lingered on Li Xiujin. The empress, perceptive to her intentions, beckoned her to sit closer and praised her while looking at the emperor. Yuezhe has been alone in the capital for years, and it is truly heart-wrenching. Fortunately, she is so lovely. Your Majesty, Yuezhe is now 17. It is time for her to settle down. As an old woman, I seek a favor on her behalf, to ease the worries of her parents far away in Heqing. The empress was of the Zheng clan and also Yuezhe's aunt. She must have heard that the Duke's letter had reached the palace, but had yet to receive a response.
Li Xiujin raplia, naturali.
He lightly tapped the armrest of his chair, surveying the assembly. In that case, let it be known today, I shall bestow a marriage upon her. Zheng Yuezhe, who had initially been shy and looking down, trembled at his words and raised her head. What? The emperor's personal decree for a marriage could not be dismissed lightly. Whispers filled the hall as everyone speculated on the emperor's intentions. As Li Xiujin's gaze roamed among the eligible young men of the capital, Zheng Yuezhe grew anxious, casting frequent glances at the empress who had spoken earlier. The empress, unaware that her encouragement had escalated to this point, lost her sense of propriety. Your Majesty, how can this be a marriage decree? Have you forgotten the letter from Qinghe? At this juncture, it was nearly an open affront, yet Li Xiujin remained puzzled. A letter? When was this? I have been hunting in the northern mountains for the past half-month and have not yet finished reviewing the backlog of memorials. Does the Zheng family have an urgent matter? Zheng Yuezhe nearly gasped for breath, her body softening as the empress supported her. For the past month, news of her imminent entrance into the palace had spread far and wide, and the Zheng family had assumed the emperor would not let such a splendid opportunity to reclaim military power slip away. They had circulated the rumors in the capital while the emperor was away. The aim was twofold: to create momentum for Zheng Yuezhe's palace entry and to harbor a sense of disdain for Li Xiujin, believing he would have no choice but to acquiesce. Who could have anticipated that he would merely state he had not seen the letter? But who would dare to inform Li Xiujin of the letter's contents, which had become common knowledge, while he, the emperor, remained oblivious? The empress found herself at a loss for words, her age rendering her vulnerable to her family's machinations.
No urgent matters.
My sister and brother-in-law have mentioned their anxiety regarding Yuezhe's marriage, and I presume their letter to you would contain similar requests. In that case, there is no need for me to read the letter. Today, I shall grant Zheng Yuezhe a good match. I believe she is quite suited to the heir of the Duke of Wei. Xie, do you consent? Xie, who had just changed into a new outfit and taken a seat, was unexpectedly called upon before he could fully process the situation. How could he possibly decline? In both this life and the last, his longing was for this very outcome. Yet, he hesitated to respond immediately, instinctively turning his gaze in my direction. The attention of the assembly swiftly followed suit, shifting towards me. My mother's expression instantly cooled, as did that of Li Xiujin. Xie, where do your eyes wander? You were not worthy of the previous engagement, yet surely this one is within your reach. You need not belittle yourself. His loud proclamations at the entrance of the Chui residence from the previous day were fresh in everyone's memory. Li Xiujin's words elicited laughter from the crowd, gradually dissipating my mother's displeasure. Yet, the focus of her displeasure transferred to Zheng Yuezhe's. I then heard Xie declare, I am willing. After the banquet concluded, a guard approached me on Li Xiujin's behalf. Have you figured it out? Why do I wish for you and Xie to break off your engagement? He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his expression obscured. Following the banquet, I felt a pulsating answer within me. Having borrowed courage from the fruit wine I had consumed earlier, I boldly asked, Your Majesty, do you harbor feelings for me?
Li Xiujin stifanat momentarily.
Then seemed to exhale in relief, turning to face me. His eyes revealed a tumult of emotions. At last, you no longer think I am merely amused by watching court officials bicker? I forced a laugh, yet found it difficult to meet his gaze. My thoughts swirling in confusion as I attempted to process the revelation that Li Xiujin likes me. However, he took 2 steps closer, brushing a snow-white petal from my hair. I had not intended for this to happen so soon, but perhaps my fear has overwhelmed me. Fearing the passage of time would not grant me another chance. Chui Wan, could you harbor feelings for me? In an attempt to bridge the gap between us. He even refrained from referring to himself as I. Instead, he gazed at me with earnest hope. Although I had lived 2 lives, my heart had long grown indifferent and cold. Yet, perhaps because I had never felt affection for anyone in either life, an unfamiliar warmth surged through me, causing my cheeks to flush crimson. I found myself tempted to acquiesce. The last time I agreed to someone's request, it was for my parents' peace of mind and to placate Xie feigned affection. What about this time? Was there still a dreadful outcome awaiting me? My silence gradually dimmed the hope in Li Xiujin's eyes. Just before the light could vanish entirely, he lowered his gaze and placed a jade pendant of exquisite green in my hand. I shall await your answer, regardless of what it may be. dismounting the carriage. My heart raced as I hurried to my chamber, my father attempting to catch up to me with questions, but failing. What is wrong with Wanwan? Have you seen a ghost? My mother murmured behind him. Indeed, she has encountered the ghost you dread the most. I rushed into my room, burying myself beneath the covers to hide my burning face. The next day, as I toyed with the jade pendant, my cousin burst in, tears streaming down her cheeks. Wanwan, please save me. I do not wish to marry into the Xie family. I tucked the pendant away and regarded her quietly. How may I assist you, cousin? You must declare your desire to marry Xie Zichen, profess your affection for him, so that your father will petition for another marriage decree. Everyone knows that the emperor listens most intently to your father's words. If you do this, both you and I can have our wishes fulfilled. She spoke with an air of inevitability, as if every time I was expected to yield to her whims. As you wish, but dear cousin, if Xie Zichen truly favored me, would he have so ruthlessly called off our engagement? In my previous life, he had not annulled the betrothal. Thus my cousin could easily sway me. In this life, the truth lay before us, and even she bore a troubled expression. With utmost sincerity, all things can be achieved. My dear sister, she proclaimed, he is the most eligible bachelor in the capital, the object of many noble women's dreams. If you were to marry him and spend time together, he would surely come to favor you. Is that truly the case, cousin? I responded, displaying a look of utter bewilderment. Prompting Zheng Yuezhul to press on, of course it is. When has my cousin ever deceived you? Very well then. Zheng Yuezhul sighed in relief, her eyes sparkling with delight as she departed. However, the following day, a tale of a fated love blossomed throughout the capital, captivating the attention of all in taverns and tea houses. The protagonists of this story were none other than Xie Zichen and Zheng Yuezhul. I heard that the ancestral jade hairpin from the Wei Guogong mansion is meant for the Xie family's daughter-in-law, yet someone spotted it adorning Zheng Yuezhul's head. On the night of the Lantern Festival, a servant from a noble family paid 50 taels to rent my boat, and upon my return to collect it, I found Xie and Zheng together by the river. Even more astonishing, it has long been said that young Master Xie possesses exceptional literary talent. Last year at the poetry gathering, he won first prize with a poem. Does anyone recall its title?
Muzu.
What a splendid piece, indeed. The capital buzzed with gossip, as more and more claimed to have witnessed their intimate rendezvous, even amidst the swirling rumors of Zheng Yuezhul's impending entry into the palace. While my engagement with Xie Zichen remained unresolved. One is a betrothed fiancé, the other a cousin. How tragic for the Miss Cui. In my opinion, the notion of her entering the palace is utterly ludicrous. Our young emperor is so youthful and his harem so empty. Why would he need to invite a noblewoman with unclear ties to his cousin's fiancée as a consort? Although Li Xiujin and I were not the central figures in these tales, we became the objects of pity. Having ascended to the throne at the tender age of 10, Li Xiujin had ruled diligently for 8 years, demonstrating a profound love for his people. He frequently donned common attire to mingle incognito, earning the affection of the populace. His backstory evoked much sympathy, with many feeling indignant on his behalf. Recent rumors even suggested that a marriage proposal had materialized as a stroke of divine intervention, linked with significant decisions he had previously made. When Zheng Yuezhul sought to visit me once more, I preemptively sent away my maid to avoid her. Let me in. I have urgent matters to discuss with my sister. At this juncture, what further explanations can Miss Zheng possibly provide? Our mistress has been exceedingly kind to you, even planning to assist you with that matter. Surely that is not mere jest? She has been heartbroken and furious, having just cried herself to sleep. Please, do not disturb her. Zheng Yuezhul, unfazed by my maid's words, attempted to force her way in, only to be halted by the arrival of Xie Zichen. Upon seeing him, she instinctively covered her nose. Young master, why do you smell of refuse? There are eggshells and vegetable leaves on your clothes. From where have you come? Xie Zichen pursed his lips, his expression darkening as he remained silent. Meanwhile, his attendant wiped remnants of food from his face, exclaiming, "The people of the capital have gone mad. In the past, they would throw fresh fruits into our master's carriage as tokens of affection, but today they treat him like a pariah." Zheng Yuezhul attempted to charge into my courtyard again, but as she stepped back, still holding her handkerchief to her nose, the increasingly sensitive Xie Zichen seized her hand and dragged her away. Zheng Yuezhole, today, even if everyone else scorns me, you must not let go of me, Xie Zichen. What is this sticky substance on your hand, egg white? Once they had departed, I finally emerged. In this life, they need not hide their affections. They could relish the freedom to be together. Instruct the servants to thoroughly clean the path they traversed.
Afterward, Li Xiujin, disguisa.
Ventured out of the palace to accompany me on several outings. He was a commendable emperor, youthful yet composed, often engaging in conversation with the elderly at tea stalls or gently helping a small beggar who had fallen at his feet. When encountering street performers, he would clap and reward them, resembling any ordinary young gentleman of his age in the capital. Yet, I remained hidden behind him, hesitant to meet his gaze. He turned slightly, asking, "What troubles you?" The Tibetan performer's large insect was leaping through a series of flaming hoops, each more intense than the last. My heart raced, and instinctively, I grasped his sleeve tighter. I do not like fire. To my surprise, he stiffened for a moment before slowly turning to seek my hand. For some reason, I sensed that he appeared more anxious than I. It was my fault. We need not watch any longer. The warmth of his grasp enveloped me, and he led me away. I hesitated. Never mind, I've suddenly lost my fear. Li Xiujin allowed me to remain sheltered behind him, occasionally glancing over his shoulder. However, he seemed to have lost interest in the spectacle, frequently looking back. With our hands intertwined, I felt emboldened, even remarking, "That insect is quite remarkable. It shows no fear of the flames, which can be very painful if they touch you." Suddenly, Li Xiujin pulled me into his embrace. Surrounded by a cacophony of cheers and applause for the performers, no one noticed our closeness. Yet, he held me tightly, burying his head and remaining silent. I should have asked him what was wrong. He was at a loss for words, but eventually murmured, "Wanwan, I am sorry." I had intended to say that he was unaware of my fear of fire. But before I could speak, a thought struck me like lightning. I suddenly became aware and wished to confirm my suspicion by looking at Li Xiujin's face, like flipping over a hidden card on a gambling table. At last, I beheld it. "Li Xiujin, you too have been reborn, have you not? When did this occur?" "The very first moment. Upon returning from the hunt, I recognized you at the foot of the rockery. Once we distanced ourselves from the clamor of the crowd, my emotions became harder to contain. I felt as if my throat were constricted. So, you kept watch over me for an entire night, not because I pleaded with you. I understood the significance of that night for you. Given the chance to start anew, I would never allow those events to unfold. I cannot bear any risk when it comes to you. Thus, in this life, I returned from the hunt, weary but resolute, surrounded by the imperial guard as I personally kept watch over her throughout the night. I was at a loss for words. Two souls, weathered by a lifetime, reunited again in this manner was a feeling unlike any other. Li Xiujin gazed at me. "Wanwan, though I still arrived too late. It was fortunate that I managed to express my feelings before any further complications arose. My patience remained steadfast. You may take your time in responding." Indeed, I needed time to sort through my thoughts. Li Xiujin seemed to understand this, and we tacitly agreed not to meet again. After my cousin left, my days settled into a calm routine. Yet, I remained oblivious to how the rumors had transformed. Suitors arrived at our doorstep, but my mother skillfully deflected them. My father had no objections. He only recognized that my mother had made a promise to me, and that promise deserved fulfillment. Besides, you are still so young. How absurd for these people to come daily, attempting to snatch away my daughter. I relished my newfound freedom, yet at times I would inexplicably think of Li Xiujin, wondering what he might be doing and whether he thought of me as well. I had yet to inquire about my parents' fate after my death in the previous life. 2 months passed, and I could no longer contain my longing. Taking the jade pendant with me, I intended to visit the palace, but encountered Xie Zichen at the gates, a figure I had not seen in quite some time. He has lost considerable weight, his cheeks slightly sunken, transforming from the once illustrious first son of the capital into a disheartened scholar trapped in the throes of unfulfilled ambition. Since that rumor, he departed the capital with Zheng Yuezhu and hastily performed the rites at the Zheng family in Qinghe. Only the Duke of Wei and his wife attended, returning with grim expressions. The Duchess confided in my mother, lamenting her ignorance as to why their only son would leave the capital to become a son-in-law to a family of wolves and ambition. The Duke's face was ashen, remarking that the Xie family was steeped in loyalty, while the Zhengs were merely usurpers claiming dominion over the mountains, and that even if they were to perish, he would still not acknowledge such a son. Fortunately, as the Duchess spoke, she fainted, and my mother hastily summoned a physician, revealing that she was with child and must not be troubled. It seemed like a blessing in their later years, providing the Duke and Duchess with a new ray of hope. As for how Xie fared at the Zheng household, I was indifferent. Fewer and fewer cared about the capital's affairs. When I encountered him on a narrow path, I merely wished to pass swiftly, yet I was intercepted.
Qui van?
What brings you to the palace? What concern is it of yours? I intended to ignore him, but I heard him call out from behind. Do you know what this person you seek did to your parents in the last life? Do you know that when I locked you in the Xie household, your parents were imprisoned by that very person? I halted 5 paces from the palace gates.
And he caught up to me.
In the last life, while you were in the Xie family, my parents treated you well. Do you think your father is unaware of this? The cunning rabbit dies, the hound is cooked. Your father, as the royal tutor, understands imperial strategies better than anyone. And he anticipated this day long ago. Marrying you into the Xie family was not about keeping an eye on me, but about entrusting you to his friends, the Duke and Duchess of Wei. After a moment, I regained my voice. So, you hate me so deeply. Indeed, I despise you. For you are as much a shackle to me as the family rules that have molded me since childhood. I do not wish for a daughter-in-law chosen by my parents. I desire to have my wife, Xie. Do you understand? I blinked. Congratulations, you now have won an unacknowledged wife, yet one you love dearly. Upon hearing this, Xie appeared as if he could scarcely bear it, shaking his head and muttering, "It is not like that, it is wrong." I stood still, uncertain whether to advance or retreat. Li Xiujin, do you truly exist? Just as I stared at the imposing palace gates, they swung open, and a guard approached me. The Emperor wishes to see you, Mississippi. I followed him inside, traversing the grand palace corridors, until I beheld Li Xiujin lying upon the bed. His bandaged wounds seeped blood, and his pallor was ashen as he forced a smile at me. I did not wish for you to see me in such a state. Yet there are always those who seek to ruin my lifelong endeavors. No matter how I inquired about the origin of his injuries, he remained silent. Despite my insistence to wait until he healed to speak, he would not relent, revealing past events. It was a trap set up by the Grand Tutor and me. Through his narration, I learned for the first time the events that transpired after I entered the Xie family, which had previously been unknown to me. My father, supporting Li Xiujin over the years, had accumulated numerous political foes. These individuals plotted to eliminate my father to strike against the young emperor. Later, my father and Li Xiujin conspired to eliminate the treacherous courtiers, after which my parents were safely released. 1-1. No matter how adept I am at imperial strategies, I would never harm the Grand Tutor. The Grand Tutor is not only a teacher to me, but also a father and a father-in-law. I shot him a disdainful glance, yet found my hand firmly grasped. What will become of my parents after I die? Li Xiujin, reluctant to divulge, sighed upon seeing my stubbornness. The Grand Tutor turned gray overnight, and the princess fell ill upon hearing the terrible news. However, I protected them for the remainder of their years. They returned to their hometown, indulging in pastoral life, and passed away peacefully. I wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, gazing at Li Xiujin, unsure of what to say. The more I struggled to find words, the more likely I was to err. And you? In the last life, your cousin became a consort and was with child, only to perish. And you lost your first child as well. I killed her. What? I struggled to comprehend. I never touched her. Her child was not mine. I was utterly astonished. My cousin and Xie had dared to act so boldly. Had the Duke of Wei known, he would have surely eliminated his own son on the spot. Reflecting on the glances they shared before me in the last life, I felt an inexplicable empathy for Li Xiujin. They were indeed despicable. And I understand your rage at her. I did not kill her for that reason. I did not touch her, yet she became pregnant, conveniently silencing the concerns of those courtiers regarding heirs, ensuring peace. Yet, she set her sights on you. I was momentarily taken aback. I had always thought my cousin would not go so far as to kill me, even if she tormented me. Noticing Li Xiujin's growing pallor, I finally felt a pang of compassion. Do not speak further. Rest well. I fear that if I do not speak, you will once again be led astray. I do not trust just anyone. I had never seen Li Xiujin in such a vulnerable state, innocent to the point of fragility, gripping my hand as if genuinely fearing my departure. Enchanted, I leaned closer and pecked his warm, soft lips. I will not run away, all right? His cheeks flushed crimson, rendering him far more endearing than his usual serious demeanor. Unable to resist, I kissed him again. His face grew even redder, his eyes shimmering as he softly called out to me, Wanwan. If you kiss me again, I shall feel no pain. I unwittingly obliged. But as I attempted to withdraw after the kiss, a large hand suddenly pressed against the back of my head, preventing my escape. He leaned in, slowly deepening the kiss, and before I knew it, our positions had shifted. I was left breathless from the kiss. Our bodies pressed together, in a daze. I felt something stirring within me. My face turned a deep crimson. Li Xiujin appeared momentarily startled, yet unfazed by the situation. He drew closer, his breath ragged. Wanwan. Help me. Dear brother Jean, please? The wound tore open half an hour later, and my father arrived an hour after. He hoisted me back home, launching into a tirade. If there were ill intentions, it could be considered regicide. Our entire family would be doomed. I recalled the sight of Li Xiujin bleeding profusely, rendering me mute with fear. While wiping my tears, my father suddenly regarded me with suspicion. Was it merely an embrace that caused such a wound? It is true, father. I am not lying. Perhaps I was too forceful. Yet, I inwardly chastised Li Xiujin. When I asked if it hurt, he merely said he wanted to feel some pain. That rascal. Eventually, my father believed me, but he and my mother remained unusually composed. I was anything but calm. Do you not have any questions for me? Your affairs are well known to me and your father. We were already aware of the situation. The last time you had a nightmare, your father stormed to the palace, only to return in tears, speaking of candlelit conversations, yet it was all soothed by Jean. Who was crying? It was you who told me. You claimed Jean was a fine lad, and if he could become a son-in-law, he would not allow those old geezers in the court to take advantage. It is getting late. My lady, we should take our leave, and Wanwan ought to rest. After my parents departed, I sighed in relief. Yet, recalling earlier events, my face flushed once more. I genuinely worried about Li Xiujin's freshly bandaged wound, already plotting how to sneak out the next day to see him. Li Xiujin would inevitably suffer injury, a consequence of the Zheng family's impatience. In the previous life, under the pretense of relinquishing military power, the Zheng family demanded that Zheng Yuanzhu enter the palace. Subsequently, upon discovering that Zheng Yuanzhu was with child, the Zheng family rallied troops from various counties in Qinghe, brazenly declaring that the tiger talisman they had submitted was a counterfeit. They asserted that if Li Xiujin were to acknowledge the child in Zheng Yuanzhu's womb as the crown prince, they would grant him half of a genuine military talisman. The court was enraged, denouncing the Zheng family for their shamelessness. When Zheng Yuanzhu met her tragic fate, the Zheng family rose in rebellion, and Duke Wei engaged them in battle. What should have been a resounding victory turned disastrous when soldiers in the camp inadvertently revealed that Li Xiujin's son had perished in a self-immolation, taking his daughter-in-law with him. Overcome with grief, he penned a blood letter of apology to his imprisoned friend, Cui Yuanshan, before succumbing to despair on the battlefield. Li Xiujin tightened his grip on my hand as he recounted this tale. In that war, over 100,000 lives were lost. Though the Zheng family was ultimately defeated, I remained in power for several years, and that remains my greatest regret. So, you have chosen to relive this life in hopes of preventing that war. Having held the throne alone for decades, I have pondered that war day and night, replaying it 1,000 times, always seeking a bloodless resolution. Thus, from the moment of my rebirth, I began to lay clandestine plans against the Zheng family. Like an umbrella, no matter how well it shields from wind and rain, if its joints are secretly altered, it will eventually wither. I could only wonder how Li Xiujin's emissaries had managed to incite the Zheng family to send assassins into the palace. My heart ached as I gazed at the blood-soaked bandages. It's not entirely without bloodshed. Li Xiujin chuckled, though I welcomed guests with open doors. I managed to avoid the fatal blows during the assassination attempt. It is of little consequence. Only when you arrived did I find myself in a predicament. I covered his mouth, my ears burning with embarrassment, unwilling to let him continue. The Zheng family has pushed forth a scapegoat, someone you know.
Who?
The next time I encountered Xie Zichen, he was on the prisoner cart. He was smeared with the foul remnants of eggs and leftover food hurled by passers-by, enduring the curses of countless citizens. How dare he attempt to assassinate our emperor? It takes generations to produce a worthy ruler. We watched him grow up in the capital. What capital's first young master? He is rather the most shameless. A well-read scion, raised in a noble family, has fallen to such a state, bringing shame upon the Duke's estate. Duke Wei, who has spent his life in battle, truly did not deserve such a son. Thankfully, they have already severed ties. The Duchess is about to give birth, ensuring a successor. Xie Zichen's expression was vacant, yet he spotted me, rising to his feet while clutching the shackles. I pinched my nose, mimicking his previous disdain for me. Xie Zichen, in this second life, why do you persist in making yourself so odious? Is it because you found the last one too pristine? He hung his head, lost, as if searching for a crack to vanish into. I wished to rectify the regrets of my past life, to live a life free of constraints, yet somehow, I have ended up like this. Many things have not unfolded as I envisioned. Yuanzhu does not truly harbor affection for me, and my feelings for you are not entirely sincere either. Young Master Xie, it is time for you to depart. He grasped the railing tightly.
Guivan.
If only I had not heeded the Zheng family's words in my past life and had not harmed you, if we could have continued together over time. Would you, I would not. His astonishment at my bluntness left him dazed as he gazed at me. Why? Because someone informed me that had I not perished by your hand, he intended to claim me for himself. The words of that individual echoed in my mind, seemingly jesting yet serious. The only infamy I wish to leave behind is that of usurping a minister's wife. Xie Zichen understood. Before departing, he asked, having faced my downfall, "Can you forgive me now?" I remained silent for a long while before sighing. Very well.
Thank you.
As I watched the relief wash over his face as he walked away, I lingered in place for some time. Suddenly, a thunderous sound erupted in the distance as flames engulfed the prisoner cart, swiftly consuming its occupants, leaving behind only cries of anguish. I averted my gaze. Turning to those beside me, "Let us depart." Indeed, this was a resolution to my grievances. After Zheng Yuanzhu entrusted the tiger talisman to me, she clutched my hand tightly, as if it were her last lifeline. "Sister, I listened to your words and stole it. Now, will anyone still wish to harm me?" Her expression was tense, her eyes vacant, and the hollows beneath them betrayed her sleepless nights. Beneath the tattered hem of her dress lay the wounds inflicted by the Zheng family. I responded with a gentle smile, "Of course not. What did I say in my letter? The emperor wishes to kill me, the Zheng family wishes to kill me, and only my cousin treats me well. As long as I heed your words, I can survive. Such a good girl." I rewarded her with a piece of candy. "Now go back to your room, hide well, and do not let the Zheng family discover you." She nodded obediently and followed my instructions. Watching her tiptoe away, I was reminded of my former self. My cousin could never have imagined that one day our roles would reverse. Time will tell. She will learn to adapt, and will likely do better than I ever did. When I presented the tiger talisman to Li Xiujin as a New Year's gift, he was utterly incredulous. "You traded your jade token for this? You did not suffer a loss. I have spent years scheming for this, and yet you managed to acquire it so easily. What reward do I receive? Perhaps a kiss from you?
What?
Or should I kiss you instead?
Do
you wish to be like Wanwan? It is still daytime, and I must seek the grand tutor shortly. What if I arrive late?"
Li Xiujin.
"I truly find you impossible. I shall acquiesce, for who can deny your capabilities? I never said I wanted to, outside." The first rays of sunlight of the new year broke forth, as spring snow melted and all things revived. Li Xiujin's side story.
1.
Becoming an emperor was a lesson instilled in Li Xiujin from a young age, a path he was destined to tread. Perhaps his temperament was too steady, too reserved. prompting Emperor Zhao to gently guide him. As an emperor, you may have whatever you desire. At that moment, he had just seen the Grand Tutor escort Cui Wan out of the palace. Through the window, Cui Wan glanced back frequently, her eyes brimming with tears, unwilling to part. The longing of a child flickered in Li Xiujin's typically calm gaze. At 6 years old, he thought. Perhaps this meant that Cui Wan would be able to spend more time with him during her visits to the palace. It was only later that he realized this was a lie passed down from his father. He had witnessed his father, in an effort to consolidate loyal officials, bring one noble lady after another into the harem, observing the diminishing smiles on his mother's face, which turned into a silent melancholy. The day he was poisoned during a meal, it was the first time his mother lost control, kneeling before his father and coldly declaring, "I shall relinquish my position as empress for the safety of my son." His father was struck as if by lightning. "Is this how you perceive me?" Later, it was discovered that it was the favored consort who plotted against him, and his father had her executed for endangering the heir. It was said that the consort realized his affections were mere pretense and met her end by crashing into a pillar, her brain splattering, still bearing twins in her womb. Haunted by nightmares, Li Xiujin awoke to find his father, yet in fear, he recoiled from his outstretched hand. His father would often linger outside his mother's chamber, accumulating frost and dew upon his head but never entering. In his final moments, he held his mother's hand, lamenting, "I have ultimately failed our youthful promise." He departed without receiving a word of forgiveness from her, leaving him with a lingering regret. Wiping away a tear, Li Xiujin suddenly pondered, was the emperor's fulfillment of desire nothing more than a complete fabrication? It had been a long time since he had seen Cui Wan.
2.
With the passing of his father, he became the heir designated by the late emperor. Yet how could a 7-year-old child command respect in the court, no matter how composed? He remained just a child. It was his mother who held his hand, guiding him onto the grand hall, even as his legs trembled beneath him. The Grand Tutor had significantly increased his studies. During the 3 years his mother held power, he studied late into the night, rising early to continue his lessons. All distractions were meticulously eliminated by him or his mother. Everyone around him eagerly anticipated his growth into an emperor. In the absence of Cui Wan, Li Xiujin often found himself daydreaming about what she had become, pondering whether she still wept as she used to. During his practice of archery and horseback riding, he salvaged a piece of wood, secretly bringing it back to his quarters. Each day, upon completing his studies, he would take it from his sleeve and patiently carve it. This routine persisted for 3 years, culminating on the day of his official coronation. It should have marked the beginning of his long-cherished aspirations. Yet, several elderly ministers suddenly challenge him. The young emperor has grown, but how can we ascertain the truth of today's coronation? Li Xiujin's right eyelid twitched violently. What do you mean by that? Your Majesty, I merely fear that if today proceeds like the previous years of curtain-draped governance, it will undermine the emperor's dignity. Their long-standing grievances against the Empress Dowager were palpable in their every word. Enraged, Li Xiujin imposed a year's salary penalty on several ministers before the ceremony could even commence. In these 3 years, how has the Empress Dowager's governance fallen short of the people's desires? If you still harbor grievances, you may present your own 3 years of accomplishments for discussion. There is no need to waste breath on baseless conjectures. With that, he swept away, leaving the court in stunned silence. The Empress Dowager gazed at him with pride. My dear Jean is so remarkable. I will ensure no one casts aspersions upon you. She embraced him in silence for a long while. Li Xiujin understood her pride and felt fortunate to finally be in a position to protect her. However, the very next morning, the Empress Dowager was found in her palace, having consumed poisoned wine, her body already cold. He wept as he implored the Grand Tutor. Why? The Grand Tutor wiped away his tears with a heavy sigh. The Empress Dowager knew that only through this sacrifice could your Majesty's path be truly smooth. Indeed, the winds of the court shifted dramatically. Ministers who had spoken in riddles that day wept as they extolled the Empress Dowager's noble sacrifice, deserving of posthumous honors. Li Xiujin sat at the end of the grand hall, feeling the cold wind from the other end pierce him to the bone. From that moment on, he felt neither joy nor sorrow, as if he were a born emperor. Everyone overlooked his youth, except for the Grand Tutor, who harbored unspoken concerns. Your Majesty is merely 13. You ought to cultivate other interests lest you exhaust your health. Li Xiujin immediately thought of Cui Wan, yet in the presence of the Grand Tutor, he dared not express it, merely smiling in response. A few days later, the wooden sculpture he had hidden in his sleeve fell at the Grand Tutor's feet. With a single glance, the Grand Tutor recognized its form. Yet, he remained silent and returned the sculpture to Li Xiujin. I have a daughter, 2 years younger than your Majesty. She has grown increasingly reserved and quiet over the years. My wife and I worry that if she matures in this manner, she will endure much hardship. Li Xiujin's thoughts stirred. Then let her avoid places of hardship. The Grand Tutor shook his head. Where in the world is there no hardship? Even your Majesty is not exempt. Li Xiujin's throat tightened as he met the Grand Tutor's profound gaze. I only ask that your Majesty assist me in guiding my daughter towards a simple path. The Grand Tutor understood, Li Xiujin thought. A simple path. The Grand Tutor and the princess had devoted themselves tirelessly, loyal to the throne. If this were their singular wish, he ought to acquiesce. Li Xiujin replied, very well. Behind him, the Grand Tutor bowed in gratitude, and for the first time, Li Xiujin disregarded the respect due to his teacher and turned to leave. Trembling, he placed the wooden sculpture in a box before recalling that the begonia on her skirt had yet to be carved. Nevertheless, he locked the box. At the age of 15, Li Xiujin received a letter from Xie. The heir of the Duke of Wei had betrothed himself to Cui Wan. The letter was filled with boastful phrases, lacking any refinement typical of a gentleman from the capital. Li Xiujin felt a twinge of disappointment. The simple path chosen by the Grand Tutor was perhaps too mundane. Yet, jealousy ignited within him. He penned 8 disdainful words, intending to humiliate the man. It had been a long time since he had engaged in such childish behavior. On the day Cui Wan reached adulthood, Li Xiujin was absent from the capital. He had traveled incognito for over half a month, only to return and discover that the marriage between the Cui and Xie families had been hastened. His attendant recounted the events, and Li Xiujin felt a surge of fury towards Xie. How could he act so thoughtlessly on the very day of her coming of age, disregarding Cui Wan's reputation? The Grand Tutor could condone this? Li Xiujin remained silent as he observed the procession of the wedding party, his attendants trembling in fear of his potential wrath. The wind lifted a corner of the bridal veil, revealing her bashful yet enchanting countenance. With a single glance, Li Xiujin averted his eyes. As if something had pricked him painfully. Return to the palace, he commanded. When the Zheng family petitioned for Zheng Yuezhu to be enshrined as a consort, they relinquished the military power of Huainan. Li Xiujin's harem was devoid of any consorts, and the vacant position of empress loomed large. Although the Zheng family has grand ambitions, the current moment presents an opportune chance to reclaim Huainan, the ministers asserted, and indeed, they were correct.
Li Xiujin rakalla Zheng Yuezhu.
He had encountered her once and noticed that Cui Wan had lowered her head even further in her presence. Lacking any fondness for her, the Zheng family claimed she had long admired the emperor and wished to be by his side. Even the Grand Tutor urged him to take this step. Li Xiujin had no desire for Zheng Yuezhu. He could not bear the thought of being in her presence day and night, nor did he wish to touch her. Should she conduct herself with decorum, he might allow her to retain her title as a princess and marry elsewhere once military power was consolidated. Yet this noblewoman, who had coerced him into this position, was fervently involved with Xie. Li Xiujin once again contemplated eliminating Cui Wan's fickle husband. However, a despicable pleasure arose within him at the thought. If this were the case, then he had awaited his opportunity. Harboring such thoughts, even though the Zheng family was restless, Li Xiujin found Zheng Yuezhu increasingly agreeable, until he discovered that Zheng Yuezhu and Xie had repeatedly dragged their private affairs into Cui Wan's presence. It was unimaginable what kind of hardship she must endure. The Grand Tutor and the princess, imprisoned, were unaware of the scheme unfolding. Pressured by her family, Zheng Yuezhu sought to drug him to conceive an heir. He openly poured out the cup of tea, nonchalantly dismissing her attempts. Zheng Yuezhu, humiliated and resentful, stared at him for a long while before breaking into a frenzied laugh. She had managed to appease the Zheng family, and 4 months later, her belly swelled. It was the child of a guard from the palace. Zhang Yuezhu seemed unfazed by the scandal being exposed before the emperor. She hoped for his wrath, whether for the sake of power or her husband's dignity. Yet, Li Xiujin remained remarkably calm, proclaiming to the world that the noblewoman was with child and promoting her to consort. Zhang Yuezhu finally realized that the young emperor's eyes only sparkled when he beheld her foolish cousin. What had Cui Wan done to deserve such fortune? Zhang Yuezhu could not comprehend, especially since Xie Zichen was a heart she had toiled to win. Recently, whenever they met, Xie Zichen seemed lost in thought. "Have you fallen for her?" Her words caused Xie Zichen to drop the fan from his hands, vehemently denying it. Yet, despite her sending letters to the Xie residence, there was no response. Why did Cui Wan, without any effort, receive everything? Her inherent inferiority complex stemmed from this. The only solution was to eliminate Cui Wan. Unbeknownst to her, she had already attracted the attention of spies. Before she could act, she was bound hand and foot. Li Xiujin had sheltered Cui Wan to such an extent. Zhang Yuezhu laughed maniacally, infused with despair. What does the emperor's actions matter? Her husband is Xie Zichen. I will manipulate Xie Zichen to torment her thoroughly. Whatever good fortune Cui Wan experienced in her early life, she shall repay in her later years. Li Xiujin cast a dispassionate glance, the jade ring on his finger tapping heavily against the surface. Noticing his lack of reaction, Zhang Yuezhu recalled Xie Zichen's changes, and the smile faded from her face, her demeanor crumbling. But Xie Zichen is now oblivious to his feelings. Even when I ask him to take me away from the capital, he refuses. Li Xiujin suddenly let out a cold laugh. I would rather hope you both leave without a trace. Zhang Yuezhu's eyes widened in disbelief. The voice of the young emperor always bore a fervent cruelty. The position desired by the Zheng family shall be kept for me. Zhang Yuezhu suppressed her shock, vowing to ensure his misfortune. You are the emperor. Can you truly seize a minister's wife for yourself, tarnishing her reputation? Have you not considered that my uncle, a man of unwavering loyalty, ends up with a daughter who brings calamity to the nation? How laughable the Cui family appears. Noticing the change in Li Xiujin's countenance, she became even more triumphant. Ha, I have struck a chord, your majesty. As the emperor, are you not a pitiable figure? How many times must my cousin bear this infamous title in her lifetime, destined to be remembered as a disgrace? A guard beside Li Xiujin stepped forward to muffle her voice. That very night, both she and the illegitimate child within her were dealt with. Li Xiujin had not anticipated that Xie Zichen would act so swiftly. The fire at the Zheng estate raged throughout the night, yet the chambers of the heir and his wife remained unquenchable. He rushed there post-haste. However, the inferno had already consumed the woman he cherished. Li Xiujin felt as if his very soul had been seared. Only a few charred bones were interred within the Xie family tomb. Dig them up, Li Xiujin commanded softly. Your Majesty, only 2 perished in the flames. These bones undoubtedly belong to the couple. There are no couples here, only the arsonist and the innocent victim. The crowd, unable to resist, endeavored to separate the 2 piles of bones, the remains of the perpetrator and the victim. The emperor extended his hand adorned with a jade ring. Give them to me. His hand bore the marks of burns, a testament to his reckless entry into the conflagration. The emperor appeared almost insane, and the onlookers fell into a hushed silence, compelled to summon Cui Yuanshan, who had just emerged from prison. Upon his arrival, Li Xiujin wrapped the fragments of Cui Wan's remains in the imperial robe, cradling them protectively, reminiscent of a 6-year-old boy who, without a care in the world, had awaited her visit with a smile since dawn. So many years had passed, yet here he stood in this sorrowful state. I can only implore your majesty to allow my daughter to remain with the Xie family. Thus, the Xie army may regain its morale, and your imperial authority will remain intact. Hearing Cui Yuanshan's trembling plea, he stood silently, casting a glance back. Master Tutor, do you know that I have harbored deep resentment towards you for half my life? Cui Yuanshan, his hair now white and his countenance haggard, dared not meet his gaze, tears streaming down his face. I know, but with Binzhou lost and Duke Wei deceased, your majesty must return to the palace. Li Xiujin consented to Cui Yuanshan's return to the palace to assume command. Yet, he would not relinquish Cui Wan's remains. And Cui Yuanshan had no choice but to silence all who were present at the tomb that day. Following a triumphant victory, Li Xiujin ascended to Hanzhou Temple with Cui Wan's remains. He produced a talisman that he had salvaged from the fire, impervious to flames, a curious artifact. The abbot explained that it was a soul-binding spell. Those who perish together, consumed by fire, give rise to their lamentations. It is said that this can bind their souls together once more, allowing them to continue their relationship in another life. Xie Zichen developed feelings for Cui Wan. Yet upon returning to the palace, he received news of Zheng Yuezhu's death, regretting the missed opportunity to save her. In his grief, he even directed his ire towards Cui Wan, wishing to join her in death as an apology. To claim hatred is not entirely accurate. The one who seeks the talisman ultimately desires to rekindle a relationship with the one they perished alongside. Perhaps the entanglements of this world are too numerous, and repentance comes too late, forcing one to drag another into a new life. Upon concluding, the abbot observed the young emperor's fingers turning pale with rage. He poured a cup of tea. The affairs of the world are governed by fate. By accumulating causes and effects, beseech the heavens. As a sovereign, there is a resolution. The abbot glanced at the dagger in Li Xiujin's hand, poised for self-destruction. Whether to flee or accept, it all depends on how your majesty shapes this life. Upon hearing the abbot address him in such a manner for the first time, Li Xiujin appeared to gain insight. Ultimately, he left the dagger at Hanzhou Temple. The abbot watched his departing figure, hands clasped in prayer. Years later, as the abbot aged, he witnessed Li Xiujin's lifelong endeavors come to fruition. On the day of the funeral bells tolling, thousands of citizens wept as they bid farewell to their sovereign. The loyal eunuch Ning, who had accompanied Li Xiujin throughout his life, wiped away tears in the temple. Your Majesty never fulfilled your wishes. The abbot, recalling their conversation over tea, shook his head. Intervening in fate is less fruitful than creating one's own. Li Xiujin awoke, gasping for breath as if drowning, his heart racing in confusion over his whereabouts. What is wrong? Cui Wan, still drowsy, reached out to touch his forehead. Did you have a nightmare? Li Xiujin grasped her hand tightly, pressing it against his heart as though it were a piece of driftwood. Yes, it was a dream. He clung to her, unwilling to let go.
Cui Wan.
Her back aching, chided him. Your Majesty still possesses the energy for nightmares? Do you resent me for withholding something? Not at all. I am simply
Li Xiujin.
Are you not attending court? With the ministers newly wed, I granted each a 2-day leave. It is time they showed consideration for me. Very well, you scheming indulgent. The Empress should conserve her strength. This is only the first day of leave. The moonlight shone brightly, yet could not conceal the spring within the curtain. As the night deepened and the dew thickened, the last snowfall of the new year was nearly complete. The end of the text. Thank you for listening.
And until we meet again in the next story.